And that jarring cacophony tells you you're back with the Power of Three podcast. And given that our name is the Power of Three, it seems appropriate that we're looking at an adventure featuring Doctor Number 3, John Pertwee. I'm Kenny Smith, and today we're putting Catastrophea under the microscope. What is Catastrophea, I hear you possibly ask? It was the 11th novel in the BBC Past Doctor Adventure series. It was written by Terrance Dicks and released on the 5th of May 1998 and featured the Third Doctor and Jo Grant. Interestingly, well, sort of, the book was first revealed in DWM 258. It was at the bottom of a news story where speculation mounts over the return of Frobisher. And right down there at the very end, certain for next May, is Third Doctor and Jo Grant adventure Catastrophea, to be penned by former script editor Terrance Dicks, who of course supervised all the television adventures featuring that team. So let's have a look at the book itself. Here we have one of those traditional black sheep swirls, as we have a picture of the Third Doctor. There's one of Katie Manning there as Jo Grant from Terror of the Autons, and in the background there's also a draconian, and it sort of swooshes and swirls away in the way that it did back in 1998 with stars in the background. Turning the book over, "Look at the way they just call themselves the People," said Jo. "They're too humble to give themselves a name. Or too arrogant to think they need one," said the Doctor. "The planet's real name is Catastrophea, but generally it's been rechristened Catastrophea. It's a catastrophe waiting to happen. Supposedly civilised races are exploiting the world, squabbling over its wealth and resources, while the indigenous population, golden-skinned giants, seem not to care what their own fate might be. The Doctor and Jo soon become embroiled in a plan to keep peace between different parties vying for control over the planet. But what is the strange glowing crystal lying hidden in the impenetrable jungle? How will the arrival of the proud warlike draconians affect the fragile peace? In his quest to find the truth behind the secret history of the People, the Doctor risks unleashing a force more terrible than the galaxy has known for aeons." Featuring the Third Doctor and Jo, this adventure takes place between the TV stories Planet of the Daleks and The Green Death. So there we go, the story's set. Now, before we continue, let's have our first reading from the book, courtesy of our regular co-conspirator and a man who loves a good Pertwee, is Dave Steele.
"What's the point?" said Jo Grant explosively. The Doctor looked up from the TARDIS console. "I'm sorry?" "The point of Daleks, invading planets, oppressing other races." The Doctor's greatest enemies were much on Jo Grant's mind at the moment. She and the Doctor had just survived a terrifying encounter with them on the jungle planet Spyridon. "Mind you," Jo went on, "the Daleks are welcome to Spyridon as far as I'm concerned. I just wish they'd stay there. Quite a few of them will." There was grim satisfaction in the Doctor's voice. With the help of a Thal expedition, some of whom had sacrificed their lives in the struggle, the Doctor and Jo had defeated yet another Dalek plan to conquer the galaxy, leaving behind them a Dalek army buried inside one of Spyridon's unique ice canos. The Doctor looked thoughtfully down at Jo. They made an incongruous pair. A very tall, white-haired man, his face lined with age and experience, yet alive with youth and enthusiasm, and a very small, very pretty, fair-haired girl. A wandering Time Lord and a trainee secret agent. Jo was growing up, the Doctor decided. The passage of time, the dangerous adventures they had shared, had matured her. Although she still resembled the eager child who insisted on becoming his assistant, she was brighter and tougher than she looked. She would leave him before very long, thought the Doctor resignedly. One way or another, his human companions always did. Already there had been the young Thal back on Spyridon who'd wanted to take her back with him. One day there would be someone else, someone from her own world and time perhaps. The Doctor always regretted losing his human companions, but he was going to miss Jo more than most. Still, it was better than watching her grow old and die. Sometimes humans with their single, all-too-brief lifetime reminded the doctor of speeded-up flower photography. In a matter of minutes, they sprang up, flourished, withered, and perished. "Hey!" said Joe, and the doctor realised he'd been staring silently at her for some time. "What's the matter?" she asked. "Why have you gone all broody on me?" Not wanting to reveal his rather gloomy reflections, the doctor said, "I was thinking about your question. About the Daleks." "Don't worry about it, Doctor. I was just being silly. Far from it. As a matter of fact, you've touched on one of the most important philosophical questions of all." "I have?" "The problem of evil, and why it exists in the universe. Why it's permitted to exist. And what's the answer?" Joe looked expectantly at the doctor, convinced that no question could possibly be too difficult for him. "It isn't that simple, Joe. One answer, and I don't pretend that it's entirely satisfactory, is that without evil there could be no good. You need one to balance the other." Joe considered this proposition for a moment. "You're right. It's not satisfactory," she said. "For one thing, there seems to be much more evil about than good." "That often seems to be the case," admitted the doctor. "But remember, we're only seeing a limited part of the picture. Over the entire universe, the balance might be quite different." Joe was still far from convinced. "Well, there must be an awful lot of good floating about somewhere to make up for the Daleks. And why do we never seem to run into it? All the sweetness and light, I mean. All we ever manage to find is trouble." The doctor smiled. "There are peaceful spots in the universe, believe it or not. There's a place called the Eye of Orion I must take you to one day. And of course there's Metebelis 3, famous blue planet of the Acton galaxy." Joe snorted. "Huh! If we ever get there, the scatterbrained way you seem to steer this contraption..." The doctor looked hurt. "Really, Joe, these aspersions you keep casting in my navigational abilities are quite unwarranted. The TARDIS may be a little temperamental, but as a rule I know exactly where..." The doctor's face suddenly twisted in agony. He put a hand to his forehead, clutching at the TARDIS console with his other hand. Joe jumped to her feet. "What is it, Doctor?" "Pain," he whispered. "Unimaginable pain." "What's the matter? Are you ill?" The doctor drew a deep, shuddering breath. "Not my pain, Joe. The pain of an entire world." His hands began moving over the controls. "What are you doing?" "Taking us out of the space-time continuum." "But why?" "I've got to investigate." "Why?" asked Joe again. "We're supposed to be going home." "You don't understand, Joe. I felt a sudden, immensely powerful telepathic impulse, a burst of pure pain. It was as if an entire planet was calling out for my help." He touched a control and a planet appeared on the monitor screen. "And there it is." Adjusting another control, the doctor brought the image into focus. He studied instrument readings in silence for some time, then announced, "Quite a small planet. Breathable atmosphere. Very close to a big sun. Seems to be mostly tropical." The picture on the monitor zoomed closer to the planetary surface and Joe saw a tangle of lush green vegetation. She shuddered, thinking of Spyridon and its poison-spitting plants. "Do we have to go there? I've had quite enough jungles for a while." "It probably won't be as hostile as Spyridon. And besides, it isn't all jungle. Look." The picture changed, and an aerial view of a city appeared on the screen. A city of tightly packed, rambling wooden buildings huddled around a small hill, with a wide, sluggish river flowing past. The city was surrounded with a massive stockade, as if to hold back the dense jungle which pressed in around 3 of its sides. "They've even got a spaceport," said the doctor, pointing to a flat plain just outside the city's main gate, where a handful of ships stood close to some long wooden huts. "Big deal." "It might be quite an interesting place," continued the doctor. "There'll be fascinating native markets, colourful local temples..." "Colourful local assassins as well, I shouldn't wonder," said Joe. "Not to mention muggers, thieves and cutthroats, and a wide variety of man-eating nasties and ghastly tropical diseases if past experience is anything to go by." "Don't be so parochial, Joe," said the doctor reprovingly. "Every planet has its dangers, but it also has its own particular attractions, its own culture. We'll just take a quick look around and see what the trouble is. If there's nothing I can do, if it's none of my business, we'll simply leave and go home." "When did you ever find any trouble that wasn't your business?" grumbled Joe. But the doctor wasn't listening. As his hands moved over the controls, the rise and fall of the time rotor began slowing.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. Now, the author Terrance Dicks was interviewed about this book in Doctor Who magazine by Peter Griffiths, and this was in issue 275, where he was talking through his various original novels to that point. Here's what he had to say about it, with Nev Fountain kindly reading the extract for us.
Terrance was persuaded by Steve Cole to next tackle a previous Doctor novel, and where better to make for than his Doctor, the third. That book was Catastrophea, which Terrance describes as very old-fashioned standard Who, but that seemed to be the brief.
Yes, it's brief, isn't it? Maybe to find out a bit more about the background to the book, we should speak to the man who edited it and commissioned it, and that's Steve Cole.
I'm Steve Cole, and I was Terrance Dicks' editor on Catastrophea.
So, of course, you'd worked with Terrance before doing the 8 Doctors, getting it through to print, and then, of course, this was the first time you were able to commission him all by yourself.
Yes, and Terrance and I had got on well from the start, so from our first meeting at Hammersmith Underground Station, where he handed me the manuscript for the 8 Doctors because it was very late and I needed it ASAP. We thought that rather than trust it to the postal service in these pre-email days, that I would meet him outside Hammersmith and grab the manuscript from him. And he was saying even then that he felt like Kim Philby passing secrets to the Russians, given that this was BBC Books doing Doctor Who now instead of Virgin, who had done several for. And yes, and over that process we'd had various lunches, and we'd sort of continued them since. As you know, there was an open invitation for Terrance to send in something new. And he'd sent me something called Spin Doctor, which was an 8th Doctor novel, and essentially concerned a CIA, as in Gallifreyan CIA, plot to discredit him throughout history in order to mess up a peace conference, I think, while the Doctor was on trial. And Fitz was basically impersonating the Doctor at this peace conference and taken on board. I think it was very early in that era of Fitz and Sam, and Terrance got the document and I think got excited by the character of Fitz and wanted to do something with him. Tonally, it didn't really fit with the way we were taking the 8th Doctor books. That was the trouble with it. It was, it felt a bit light and not as tortured as some of the 8th Doctor novels would have been. I mean, certainly Following Revolution Man, which I think was a nearby spot, that would have been a real, bit too jarring. And what I really wanted Terrance to do was a big 6-part Pertwee space opera, put him right back into his heartland and present that to the modern world, because he hadn't done a Missing Doctor adventure since he'd been there, even though of course he was played such an important part all through 72. So that for me was what I really wanted to see and what I asked him for. And once he was disappointed because he thought the Spin Doctor was a bit different for him and he was looking forward to writing it, but he soon got into the spirit of this new one.
It definitely has that absolutely authentic feel. You can hear very like a Malcolm Clark score playing in the background, or Tristram Cady electronic weirdness throughout. It has that kind of feel to it. Yes,
which is what I really wanted. Was have it more Pertwee than Pertwee itself. It was like almost like that dream Pertwee that we all have bubbling in our subconscious that could be like pulled together from all these different elements. I think Terrance did a lot of that. I think he was a little challenged for time around then, and I can't remember the early stages, but I did basically pitch the idea of Catastrophea to him, and I think I had a dream in which Catastrophea was mentioned. Someone saying, "What a Catastrophea," and I was puzzled by this, but I figured that it could be a planet that was such a catastrophe that its real name was something, but it was known by everyone. This is ungovernable, unmanageable mess of a planet called Catastrophea, and the Doctor would land there and things would develop. And so Terrance went away with that, and he called the planet Catastrophea, I think. I remember him saying to me, we made ourselves a bit of a hiding to nothing with this one, Steve. We called it Catastrophea. We should have called it Triumphirana. That's what we should have called it. Which did make me laugh.
Oh, he's brilliant. Oh, got him. I just miss him so much from that
Yes.
kind of silly Terranceisms. But I suppose that must have been, for you working with a childhood hero and actually giving him work. That must have been quite a buzz for you as well, and keeping in touch with a man who is, without a doubt, one of the real Doctor Who legends.
Well, that's right. I mean, Terrance was someone that I first met when I was 8, when he came to Bedford Central Library. It was... What was I? Just 9. I can't remember, but I know it was during season 17, and I know that there was a computer at Bedford Library that had a Doctor Who quiz on it. And I remember that I got very good, you are a Doctor Who expert on it, which was very pleasing. And I also know that I only knew a lot of the answers because I'd read the Terrance Dicks novelizations. So I was able to say that Tom Baker was a bohemian doctor. I had no idea what the word meant, but I knew he was bohemian because I'd read it in various of Terrance's... He probably wrote the quiz. And then I met him again when I was 12, and he came to Bedford Central Library again. And this time I was asking him questions, sage questions like, what did you look for in a Doctor Who script? And he said, pace and life, he said. And again, all these things, they kind of stay with you and you remember. And in my own writing, I've always tried to remember pace and life. So yes, when I found out that his book was the first I'd be editing, or at least was supposed to be. The Eighth Doctor's was kicking off our Eighth Doctor range, but in fact it was Devil Goblins from Neptune was my first book I edited, because Martin Day and Keith Topping delivered theirs absolutely on deadline, and Terrance went a little bit over, which became a lot bit over. But it never mattered. And so yes, I was very keen to work with him again, and as I say, getting him sort of putting his mind to work on recreating the atmosphere of the Pertwees was it was a lot of fun.
It is quite cheeky in terms of the cover, given that there's a Draconian there quite clearly, and the Draconians only show up pretty much towards the end of the book, and even then they're very quickly dismissed.
Yes, and I think they were probably just thinking, what else can we put in this book, because what are we going to do with it? So yeah, I wasn't delighted with the cover, because it was a bit of a giveaway, but at the same time it is a very clear signalling that this is Doctor Who from someone who was there in the Pertwee Draconian era. So it would feel very, very authentic. The story was stretched a bit thin, as I recall. There was a few moments of false drama where someone announces they're going to execute the Doctor and Joe, and then someone else says, oh no, maybe don't do that. And they go, all right then. And then we move on. But even that doesn't feel like hugely out of place in the times. And there were some quite poignant moments, such as the character who dies of the drug. Is it Scar, the drug in Catastrophea?
Yeah. It sounds like a Sontaran to me, but there we go.
It does. Well, originally Terrance wanted to call the drug Scoob, which was books backwards. That was why he wanted to do it. He thought that books were like a drug and you could get hooked on them. So he called it Scoob because he thought it sounded quite cool. But I think I made him change it to something. It sounded like Scooby-Doo to me, and I thought
that's what I was thinking straight away.
Exactly. Not giving a Scooby would have all sorts of different connotations. So we went for Scar in the end as well. There's that nice bit where I think someone is looking after this character who's dying, and he's got this bowl of soup or something, and he just left the bowl sort of slowly cooling on the table because there was nobody drunk now. I remember thinking that was such an effective way of getting across this sense of loss and this sense of passing like that. I thought, Terrance, you really can still do it.
Yeah, it's really well done, because a character you actually quite like, she's got a bit of personality and you remember, and then gone. And again, Terrance coming back to his obsession at the time of drugs, which obviously had been a lot of in the Eight Doctors.
Yes, the Just Say No era for Terrance.
And of course, I'd assume that you got the rights for the Draconian sorted out in the days when Virgin wouldn't bother. They'd print and be damned.
Well, this was it. Well, because Terrance and Mac Hulk were the same agency, he was able to basically negotiate for these himself, and he tended to use creations either of Bob Holmes or Malcolm Hulk because he knew that it would be easy for him to get dispensation to use. So yes, it was nice being able to bring those characters back without any bother, without having to go right around the houses jumping through hoops trying to get them in.
All in all, a happy experience for you.
Yes, it was. I mean, I remember I had to do some of the editing was what Roald Dahl termed super editing, where whole new scenes are generated by the editor in order to work it. Because Terrance did run out of time, and I remember he phoned me up and he was, we were fretting over it a little bit, and I was suggesting what we could change, what we could do. And then, after a while of processing this, he said to me, it will be all right, won't it, Steve? And I said, yes, Terrance, it will be all right. We'll be absolutely fine. And it was absolutely fine, and we were. So, yes, it was nice. I think at that stage in his career, he was happy to let someone else do a little bit of the heavy lifting for him. It wasn't that he didn't want to do it. It was just that sometimes time would creep up on him. It was a similar story with Players, which was another, possibly my favourite of his books in my time to work on. But Catastrophea was a lot of fun too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. But we want to know more. After all, it would be a very short episode of The Power of Three if we were to stop now. So, that's why we're very grateful to Terrance's widow Elsa and Simon Guerrier, who some of you may know is currently writing a biography of Terrance Dicks, which I cannot wait to read and find out more about. Courtesy of Elsa and Simon, we actually have some paperwork regarding Catastrophea, and Simon puts this into context for us here. Here are 4 pages of early notes Terrance produced for Blood of the Dragon, i.e. what became Catastrophea, typed in his Amstrad. Annoyingly, they're not dated, but I can give you some context. On the 18th of February 1997, Steve Cole wrote to Terrance to thank him for delivering the manuscript for the 8 Doctors in person, giving them a chance to meet for the first time. Steve now provided notes in the book, asking for a revised version on the 3rd of March. Overlapping with this, on the 27th of February, Simon Winston, the new editor at Virgin, sent Terrance a contract for The Mean Streets of Megacity, published in December as Mean Streets, due for delivery by the end of May. Terrance had other books to write to for Piccadilly. He also attended the Monopticon convention in May, which is where Simon met him and Steve Cole for the first time. But in amongst all of this, Terrance pitched Steve another novel, which you can read about in Simon's upcoming book, and Steve asked instead for a 3rd Doctor and Joe story, and Terrance produced the attached notes in working out what became Catastrophea. Note the names of the characters. Highsmith is surely named after Patricia Highsmith, Murdoch perhaps after Iris Murdoch, Mac after Mac Hulk, the creator of the Draconians, and in this book as published there's a character called Charteris, presumably after the creator of the saint, Leslie. So let's find out more about these and have that character list courtesy of our friend Craig Brawley.
Blood of the Dragon. Characters. The Doctor. Contemporary unit: Joe Grant, Brigg, Benton, Yates. IMC Factory Ship Crew. Highsmith, Marine Captain, female, alien traumatized. Mac, Engineer, tough, detached. Ormond, Captain, sensitive, tormented. Rogers, Accountant, greedy, inhuman. Astrid Frey, Ship's Navigator, icy Nordic blonde. IMC Earth Headquarters. Sheldon, Director, cynical, experienced, not all bad. Phillips, Assistant Director, ambitious assistant. Murdoch, Political Advisor, cynical warmonger. UN. Parelli, neurotic, unstable, power-mad director. James, cynical idealist, cunning old hand. Olivia, naive young idealist. Future Unit. Young Brigg, Ian Lethbridge Stewart, Brigg's descendant. Sergeant Benton, intellectual career soldier. Draconians. Emperor, old, wise, detached. Empress, behind-the-scenes influence. Prince, young, proud, fiery, but open-minded. Chancellor, detached, analytical, Machiavellian. Warlike noble, hardline, old-fashioned warrior. General, peace-loving, sick of slaughter.
So, Sergeant Benton, intellectual career soldier from Future Unit. I wonder who his ancestor was then. Anyway, interesting to note there the use of the unit regulars and also IMC. Of course, neither of them featured in the book. Just the Doctor and Joe. It also does note, of course, the Draconians were there, but definitely wasn't that many who appeared in the finished book as well. So, we better find out a little bit more about the original outline for Blood of the Dragon. And again, these are courtesy of Elsa and Simon, and read again by Craig.
Blood of the Dragon. Story notes. Open with IMC factory ship approaching planet. Doc at unit. Has just got TARDIS working, desperate to take trip, but doesn't want to endanger Joe. General unit byplay with Doc, Brig, Joe, Benton, Yates, etc. Doc takes off in TARDIS, Brig and Co. dash for lab. Factory ship lands on planet. Crew tensions, first worry. IMC skullduggery and plotting, back on Earth. Tension between UN and IMC re-dragons. IMC director cautious. Villains want nice little war, good for business. Factory ship crew explore and find disaster. Doc arrives on planet in wake of disaster, gets blame, captured by Highsmith's Marines. Draconian Court. Discussion of Earth Draconia problems. Earthmen, are they human? Emperor enigmatic. Prince poised but suspicious. Warlike noble and peaceful noble clash. Chancellor cautious. Mention expedition to claim strategic planets. Drac ship arrives on planet. Disaster. Humans blamed. Intrigue on Earth between rival IMC factions. Meanwhile, UN men are plotting to encourage IMC to get into trouble as a way of bringing them to heel. News of Draconian involvement on new planet gives him an opportunity. Emperor and Empress on Draconia. Empress warns Emperor of plots to assassinate him. Rebels will use soft on Earthmen charge as excuse. Establish Empress heads female intelligence network. On planet, Earthmen and Dracs clash, each blaming the other for deaths. They find traces of ancient, long-dead high-tech civilization, destroyed by some great catastrophe. Doc tries to make peace, but fighting imminent. Then both sides hit by unseen menace. Planet has a wide variety of flora and fauna, all alternately friendly or deadly. Also, natural disasters abound. Doc seems immune, which makes Drax and IMC suspicious. Explanation? The planet is sentient. All its plants, animals, and natural features, simply extensions of its consciousness, can be used as weapons. Doc not hostile, so not attacked. Drax and IMCs wants to blast planet, but Doc says fragments could drift through space and spread sentience to other planets. The only answer is to quarantine and go. Note: theme of planet's secret needs to be tied into main theme of story. Doc says it may be an experiment by the universe. Maybe more planets will cast off their oppressors unless they reform.
Now let's hear the actual story notes themselves. It's going to be interesting to hear how Terrance breaks down the storyline into what he eventually works up into an actual novel.
Blood of the Dragon. Notes. Historical background. 2000 to 3000 AD. Big federations like Megacorp, all powerful. Earth a backwater, a paradise. Planets moving towards a federation. Corporations, all powerful. Daleks, a common enemy. Draconians, explore culture of Draconian Empire. Doctor as a kind of James Bond. Joe as companion. Note, she'll have to have her memory wiped afterwards. Story takes place in pre-Draconian War period. Corporations are all powerful, mining for minerals, especially war materials. UN is feeble. Faster than light drive, but it still takes weeks for messages to reach Earth, so ship commander is man alone, may have to take vital decisions without consulting Earth. Basic story. Megacorp mining ship and Draconian survey vessel meet and clash on undiscovered planet. Planet holds mysterious alien species, which is important to both Draconians and humans for different reasons, seen differently by each species. Draconian Empire in isolation, like 19th century Japan. UN appears and wants species itself. Species' potential threat to both Earth and Draconia. period holds seeds of future, early days, fast expansion.
So Terrance has done a scene setting. Now let's hear how the story is actually broken down into scenes.
Notes continued. Osmond says business as usual, sends out survey bug. Survey bug doesn't return. Doc and Highsmith go out to check and find smash probe, dead driver, incredible force. On way back, attacked by enraged Drax. Doc calls truce. Drax say survey team trashed. Doc convinces of mutual innocence, says must track common enemy. Astrid's photo surveys show hidden city. Joint Drax/human expedition sets off. Joint expedition explores lost city. Escape terrible perils. Attack on city triggers off planetary attack. Both ships destroyed. A unit ship arrives and takes survivors back to Earth. Doc and Drax at UNHQ. Kidnapped by IMC, rescued by unit, escape to Drac court. Doc caught up in court intrigues. Anti-human party tries to assassinate him. Doc makes contact with Drac Queen Mum, power behind throne. Doc escapes back to planet with everyone on his tail. Doc menaced from all sides, everyone convinced planet holds superweapon, confrontation, brink of war. Doc explains planet is superweapon, whole planet is sentient, it destroyed former civilization. Doc says quarantine planet, establish frontier in space, build friendly relations over time. Doc goes home in pre-programmed TARDIS. Opens TARDIS door as Joe rushes into lab.
So there we go, all interesting stuff, and it gives us some idea as to how Terrance would actually work, from developing his storylines, putting down basic ideas, and then expanding on them into full prose. Absolutely fascinating. So, let's hear some of that was expanded into full prose, and hear the first encounter between the Doctor and the Draconians in this book.
A Draconian strode forwards, another at his heels, their boots ringing loudly on the black stone floor. They were followed by 7 Draconian soldiers. The soldiers spread out in a loose semicircle, covering the inhabitants of the temple with their blasters. "I am the commander of the Draconian task force," said the leading Draconian. "Where are the Earth soldiers who are using this temple as their base?" Joe looked at him in amazed recognition, taking in the long thin skull, the scaly cheeks and high-crested forehead, the wispy greying beard. The newcomer's green battle armour, with its decorative epaulettes and short cloak, was a simplified version of the elaborate robes she had seen at the Emperor's court. "It's a Draconian, Doctor." "Right first time, Joe," said the Doctor resignedly. "That's all we need." "Answer me," hissed the Draconian. "Where are the soldiers?" "What soldiers?" said Joe. "There aren't any soldiers here, except yours." "Silence, female! How dare you speak in the presence of a Draconian nobleman?" Samzire flourished his blaster menacingly at the Doctor. "Answer me, or it will be the worse for you." "For heaven's sake, use some common sense," said the Doctor. "Does this look like a barracks? Do we look like soldiers? And what the devil are you doing in this planet?" 3 very good questions, thought Sergeant Core, standing alertly at his captain's elbow. "Things are not always what they seem," said Samzire pompously. "For all I know, you may all be irregular troops, mercenaries, like the man we just executed." "What the devil are you talking about?" demanded the Doctor. Samzire nodded towards the altar. "He slaughtered 3 of my soldiers, one of them of noble rank. He was carrying their weapons." "The man you shot down was a smuggler and a thief," said the Doctor sharply. "It doesn't surprise me to learn that he was a murderer as well, but he was no kind of soldier, and neither are the rest of us." "Then who are you?" "I'm usually called the Doctor. The young lady's my companion, Miss Josephine Grant. This is Xylor, High Priest of the People, and these other gentlemen are his colleagues. Now, sir, who are you and what are you doing here?" "I am a commander of a Draconian task force." "So you said," snapped the Doctor. "Name and rank, sir! Name and rank!" To his horror, Samzire found himself stiffening to attention. Furiously he shouted, "I am not answerable to you, Earthman! I answer only to the Emperor and my fellow nobles of the Draconian Empire." "As it happens, I am a noble of the Draconian Empire," said the Doctor coldly. "The honour was conferred upon me by a previous Emperor, many years ago." "You lie! No human has ever been given draconian rank. Except one, said the doctor, deciding to let the term human pass. I was able to assist your people at the time of the Great Space Plague, burst out Sergeant Core. He came to attention. Sergeant Core! I'm pleased to meet you, Sergeant. Core turned to his captain. Beg pardon for interrupting, Lord Captain, but my father used to tell us this story, and the one who saved us was called the Doctor. He looked puzzled. But according to him, it was hundreds of years ago. I come from a long-lived race, said the Doctor. He looked hard at Samzire. Well? I am far from convinced, muttered Samzire. How else could I know such details of your past history? Unless I'd lived through them, said the Doctor, looking sternly at Samzire. Reluctantly, the Draconian addressed him. I am Captain Lord Samzire, Commander... Yes, yes, said the Doctor impatiently. House Krill. I see, said the Doctor. Thoughtfully he added, I myself was given the rank of High Earl of the Imperial House. Noblemen present, General salute, snapped Sergeant Core. The Draconian soldiers snapped to attention, blasters across their chests. The Doctor glared haughtily at Captain Lord Samzire. Samzire came reluctantly to attention and bowed his head. My life at your command. Joe suppressed a grin. The Doctor had done it again.
Thanks once again, Dave. Now, I hadn't read Catastrophea since it was published in 1998, so I went into this with some expectations. I remembered it pretty much frontier in space, but rewritten and expanded with lots of Draconians in it and space battles, and the Doctor and Joe being very true to character. And I was pretty much completely wrong. The Doctor and Joe, definitely true to character, with the Doctor being indignant and grumpy, and Joe being young and bright and impetuous, and definitely with her heart in the right place. But there's hardly any Draconians in it. I was really surprised by that. We get a landing party later on, as we discover they have a massive plan where pretty much they want to wage war on the Earth by sacrificing the group who land on Catastrophea, and then hope to have them slaughtered. I'd completely forgotten everything to do with the people, the golden skinned giants, and it's very much a story that fits in with the morals and ethics of what Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks were doing on the show at the time. Very much anti-colonialism and sending out strong signals of being kind, frankly. I have to admit I approached this with a bit of trepidation because with each of Terrance's original novels, by this point he seemed to be rehashing a lot of his old creations. So we'd had with Time Worm Exodus, we'd had The Return of the Warlords, then in Blood Harvest we'd had The Return of the Vampires. Shakedown, pretty much original, but obviously featured Sontarans and Rutans. So it was a bit of a surprise to read Catastrophea and find that it didn't really have any major continuity links to another story, particularly anything written by Terrance. But it definitely has very much a Malcolm Hulk feel to it. And that is not a bad thing. Makes it for a very enjoyable read and just feels so true to the era. And you can imagine this with a weird electronic soundtrack and, a 6-part story on TV. So it was a real surprise to me when I came to it once again. So let's go to Doctor Who magazine, see what they had to say in issue 265 when Dave Owen reviewed it. Even before opening Terrance Dicks' latest contribution to Doctor Who, one is swayed by doubts, since the very title reprises 2 of the series' follies. The first is story titles comprising only a proper noun offering title. Little clue as to the content. See Shada, Kinda, or Frontios. And the second is Dalek creator Terry Nation's charming habit of naming planets after the disasters which will befall them. Desperus, Iridius, Mechanus. After finally closing the book, one concedes that a better title might have been Solos. So heavily does it borrow from the mutants. The first similarity is in the setting, the planet of the title, where a human force of occupation keeps the natives suppressed. Although the mutants can be read as an allegory for minority rule in apartheid South Africa, Catastrophea is clearly inspired by the British Empire's colonisation of India. Far from being purely allegorical, a much more literal signal is given by having commanding officers sharing afternoon drinks brought by a native houseboy, or by the Doctor and Joe emerging from the TARDIS wearing khakis and pith helmets. This is oddly out of place in a novel firmly set after Planet of the Daleks, and the kind of imagery one would more likely expect from Stephen Wyatt or Douglas Adams. The government and the rebels who oppose them are faceless and unmemorable ciphers. Only rarely does the author attempt to flesh out the characters' past lives and explain their motivations. When he does, it is with a heavy-handedness that makes it seem scarcely worthwhile. Little rich girl turned cult hopper Alana suffers particularly. On the other hand, Terrance is adept at concisely sketching characters we know already. His Third Doctor and Jo are caricatures, and it seems that even they know it. Off-world slut, quote-unquote there, Jo, finds herself looking around during a crisis and pondering the precise moment to fall to the ground, moaning and clutching her stomach. An obsession with illegal narcotics pervades the author's recent work, as does the phenomenon of previously rational individuals suddenly turning into homicidal maniacs, like US postal workers. Akin to the Kinda of Diva Loca, the natives of Catastrophea are telepathic mutes, and docilely carry out their master's orders until turning savage and having to be culled. This placidity is self-imposed, and a similar feeling of calm overtook me as I worked through the Doctor being mistaken for a famous rebel, getting captured, escaping, getting captured again, and eventually working his way upriver to find the cause of all the disturbances. The Draconians make a cameo appearance late in the game. Given their obvious popularity and the way they have featured passingly in so much Doctor Who fiction, it's surprising that a whole book hasn't been devoted to them before. So well defined were their codes of honour and modes of speech in their sole television appearance that, by sticking closely to these, the author can't go far wrong. Had he introduced them sooner, then Catastrophea might not have come so near to deserving its title. Vainly, I wondered if the author had perhaps paid heed to Shelf Life's checklist of 8 things that never happen in Terrance Dicks' books, DWM 252, as he seems to be consciously avoiding his old habits. This is not a sequel to any of his earlier works, there is no old foe at the heart of affairs, and both vampires and corrupt Gallifreyan rulers are notably absent. But, towards the end, like an old comedy catchphrase being revived, he repeats his blood harvest trick of getting a character in the story to do what he did so many times, describing the TARDIS both wheezing and groaning. He wouldn't let it lie. Both of this month's BBC books, the other that was published for your info was Dreamstone Moon by Paul Leonard in the 8 Doctors range, feature crystals that control people's minds and bands of young rebels opposing exploitative settlers. In itself, this doesn't demonstrate a dearth of imagination, but perhaps the schedule could have been rejigged so as to stagger these books' publication months. Having successfully established a new Doctor and companion, the range can afford to diversify as well, and a novel so derivative as Catastrophea really needs to be partnered by something as avant-garde as the wonderful alien bodies. So Dave Owen wasn't a fan. What about on Goodreads? What do you, the listeners/readers, think? It's got a rating of 3.36 from 191 ratings and 27 reviews. 5 stars 13%, 4 stars 30%, 3 stars 40%, 2 stars 10%, 1 star 4%. Let's skim through some of these reviews. Here's a 5-star review from Chris. John Pertwee is my favourite Doctor, so I like to try and get my hands on any of the books he's in. And after the disaster that was Fear of the Dark by Trevor Baxendale, I grabbed this used book off Amazon as fast as possible, and being written by Terrance Dicks meant I was in for a real treat. I was definitely not disappointed. As I've said in other Doctor Who book reviews, it's important to me that the Doctor and his companions are characterised in these books properly. I need to be able to hear and feel them doing and saying the things in the book, and within the first couple of pages of this book, it was like watching some of my favourite episodes of The Third Doctor with Jo Grant. I really enjoyed this story. I felt it was written well and had a nice pace to it. I enjoyed many of the other characters, such as Avery, Walton and Charteris. I was happy to have the Draconians as part of the plot and found great amusement in the mistaken identity bit with El Lama. And of course, you can't have a good Pertwee and Jo Grant story without them ending up in a jail cell once or twice. The book really did feel like one of the great TV episodes, and for me, that's enough to recommend it to any fans of classic Doctor Who. 4 stars from Chris with a K. With the exception of some virginisms, it feels just like you're watching a Third Doctor adventure, complete with endless escapes and captures, colonial satires, blustering bureaucrats, overly idealistic rebels, and studio sets of jungles. Or so I imagine it being. If you told me this was a script for a follow-on to Planet of the Daleks that was dropped, I wouldn't have been surprised. Enjoyable stuff, without feeling dumbed down. A 3-star review now from James Barnard. It's really surprising, in hindsight, that it took 7 years for prolific novelist Terrance Dicks to write a Doctor Who book set within the era he script-edited. Contemporary opinion was that Catastrophea lived up to its name and wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. Those people were wrong. This may not be the best the BBC books had to offer, but in terms of capturing the era in which it was supposed to be set, is one of the most effective. Yes, that should be a given Dix's credentials, yet it's something Barry Letts never quite managed, and which Chris Boucher took several tries to perfect. As is often the case with Terrance Dicks's work, it isn't as easy as he makes it look. With its tale of conflict between rival factions, invasion by troublemaking aliens, small-minded bureaucrats and lawmakers, threatening landscape and heavy-handed moral message, this could have fitted seamlessly into Season 10 of the TV series. I could hear John Pertwee and Katie Manning saying the lines given to them, and picture the other characters vividly. It doesn't leave the strongest impression, but I found it a very hard book to put down. Books like this really do have their place, and I surprised myself by being pleased to have given it another go. I doubt many people will agree with me on this, but Catastrophea is, in its way, a real delight. 3 stars also from Gareth. Doctor Who takes on colonialism in this highly readable, somewhat muddled affair from Who favourite Terrance Dicks. The Doctor's determination to get involved whittles away as everyone around him makes their own assumptions about his reason for being there. Quite what the book is saying about subjugated natives and the occupying military is at times unclear, and the author's fondness for obvious references and tropes lets it down at times, but this is still quite fun. And finally, a 1-star review from Michael. Oh dear, I'm surprised Dicks didn't publish this under a pseudonym. It's riddled with cliché after cliché. Rebels, establishment, the Doctor in the middle, capture, escape, so on. The only thing that could have saved it would have been a spot-on characterisation of the Doctor, but all we seem to get is a bloke who scratches his neck a lot. Ouch, Michael. So there we go. If you've enjoyed today's pod, please feel free to leave a review for us wherever you get your podcasts from, whether it's on iTunes or Podbean or anywhere else. Follow us on social media at Power of 3Pod, on Twitter, at FinishedZine on Blue Sky, and remember to like our Facebook group too, where we often share bonus content. We're going to head now, and we like to finish with a song, and we're going to go with Love is a Catastrophe by Pet Shop Boys from the album Release. Until next time, I've been Kenny Smith. Bye-bye.
Love is a catastrophe.